You've probably heard of the term biological farming. But what exactly does it mean? Those who practice it say it's a way of farming that combines scientific methods with common sense. In essence, it's all about the soil, the so-called building blocks of life. Biological farming aims to encourage the beneficial micro-organisms in the soil. And those who've embarked on it say it's transforming their farms and their lives. Tim Lee reports.
Got to go back to school after this, I have. Oh, really? Yeah.
It's the sort of pasture that most farmers dream about. But the grass here wasn't always so green or lush. It's 3 years since the Davis family, who farm near Camperdown in Victoria's southwest, took an unconventional step.
This will tell the story now, guys.
What's on top is mighty impressive, but the real action is happening underneath. Soil health is the key to what happens above. The Davises have adopted what is loosely termed biological farming.
There's lots of worms in this, actually, Reggie. You're right through it.
The clover's come back, the worms have come back, the roots have gone down. The fertiliser that we used to put on here for the results that we're getting compared to now. This paddock here in particular hasn't had any fertiliser since October, bar the effluent through the pivot, and due to the season that's only been going every now and again too because of the rain. So it's a huge turnaround to what's been happening. It's just healthy pasture all the time.
Three years ago, Landline filmed the start of the Davis family's quest to find better ways to make their farm more productive, profitable and sustainable.
We were having a lot of pest problems in the autumn where once red-legged earthmite and lucerne flea would attack clover. It was starting to eat ryegrass, and then we were getting to the stage where we were probably spraying 3 times in the autumn. And I'm thinking, this can't be right, we can't keep heading down this track. And the other reason was in Europe they're utilising 100% of the effluent. You know, we use water out of our second pond to irrigate through the pivots, and now we're starting to make compost, so everything on the farm's going to go back on the farm.
Three years on, these rows of rich composted material are the key to the farm's transformation. Most dairy farms annually produce tens of thousands of litres of effluent. It's often seen as a liability. Tony Evans sees it as an opportunity. But like any heady brew, the recipe has to be right. And that's where the principles of biological farming come in.
Most farmers have got to stay viable. The bank manager they have to answer to. They're looking at their input costs, and that's challenging them all the time. If they can utilise what they've got first and then import nutrient, that's a really valid way of farming. I think that's what they've got to do. They've got to challenge their thinking, challenge the way they've done things. They can't keep doing things the way that they've done them.
Part of the challenge is to understand what's happening underground. Like every great drama, there's a cast of fantastic characters, good guys and bad guys.
Looking inside a nematode here, this nematode has got babies inside it.
I guess in the microscopic world there's a constant battle between the beneficial bugs and the bad bugs.
Absolutely, and I think that's the farmer's job, is to understand that enough to understand that his role is to make sure that he creates an environment for the beneficial bugs, and there's processes that he can do to encourage that. There's probably some circumstances he can't control, but there are a lot of things that he can do to minimise any damage. And then this root-feeding nematode came up to the root. This is all under a microscope. And as the nematode came up to the root, the bacteria moved towards it and actually acted as a barrier against that root. That's amazing. I don't know how or how it worked, but that principle of protecting that root, because the reason why they want to protect that root is that's where they get their sugars from.
And that's where biological farming gets its principles from.
There's a lot of interest, but a lot of people just can't get their head around it at the moment. You have to go out and source it, as there's no textbook to say what to do. So the idea is to get the specialists in the right field, which is Tony in the compost, and try and get onto someone with soil biology. It's just a matter of working through the process.
What grows above the ground is almost a symptom of what's actually happening below the ground. So if you have things growing well in the ground, then you'll probably grow different species above the ground.
Camperdown compost began 13 years ago when Tony Evans and his business partner Nick Routson sought a way to utilise local dairy waste.
We set up a licensed facility to take organic waste streams from a couple of different dairy factories. That material was then initially used for worms and producing worm castings, and it sort of evolved into a compost site where we still use some worms, but predominantly it's for composting now. And we met Elaine Ingham, I think about 1999 or thereabouts, and we started to then put together how we can best utilise it in an agricultural system.
Landline viewers met Elaine Ingham a few years back.
You can see those roots, how they're growing nice and deep through the soil. Now this fungus here is fuzzy.
Looking at soils, looking at a healthy system and pulling the soil apart and seeing what biology is there, and then looking at a depleted soil that probably hasn't got a lot of carbon, that's tight, that the rainfall doesn't go in, it runs off, all of these problems, and looking at the biology in that soil, and then coming up with some basic underlying principles of what sort of biology should be in a healthy soil. I really like the approach that you can see it, look under a microscope and see these are little critters that should be there and they're not in this soil, and that's why it behaves in this way.
Then cereal rye, then sorghum sudan grass, and then oats. That is the 6th grass crop in a row with no nitrogen.
When Gary Zimmer, a world leader in the field of biological farming, visited Australia earlier this year, his various seminars were sold out.
You follow his method.
Biological farming is actually a term. I'm a dairy nutritionist by training and got into what we call biological farming. And what, to me, it is that it's focusing on the fact that the soil is alive, it's full of biology, and it's a living system.
Can you imagine you're in a line, and there's a fence here, and they move the fence forward, and now you got something to eat, and you look back and forth.
John Lillico is a dairy farmer in northwest Tasmania, who in recent years has converted to biological farming.
A complex carbon going in, and that's the point I'm trying to get to here shortly.
In the past, we didn't really understand what microbes were in the soil and what function they had. We do now, and so we farm with complete respect for those microbes. You know, there's as much life under the soil as there is above it, and we need to respect that and we need to work with that.
The surge of interest in biological farming is partly explained by the ever-increasing scientific knowledge of what happens in the soil at microscopic level.
Prior to that time, when I first started using that word, I just wanted people to recognize that the soil was alive, and so it's really a combination. There's minerals, there's soil life, and we have not spent enough time, and to me the future is to really get the biology to work in the soil. It's going to clean up things, it's going to make our crops healthier, and it's a way to fix our soils to have, have better use of water, and right on down the line is biology is the things that's going to fix this planet.
I can honestly say failed the American farmers. We're not from New Zealand, number one.
As a farmer and agribusinessman, Gary Zimmer's best-selling books on biological farming launched him into becoming an educator of biological agriculture.
The crowd here today, I think there's some potato growers and a few vegetable growers, but the majority of the crowd's us dairy farmers down there. And we've always wanted to meet Gary Zimmer, being probably the #1 biological farmer promoter in America. He's basically written the book and the Bible that we all try to aspire to.
Gary Zimmer talks of balancing the soil and its nutrients and working with nature. And for many farmers, it was the global financial crisis that forced them to question aspects of conventional farming.
I think the price shock of 2008 really brought that message home starkly to a lot of farmers. When the price of oil went up, the price of fertilisers went up, and I think the future then became writ large for a lot of producers when they thought, OK, well, if this is what's going to happen to fertiliser prices in the future, am I going to be able to respond? Am I going to be able to maintain profitability in the face of this? Or is there a better way to farm?
However, changing from a tried and true system of production still requires a leap of faith.
They are cash-strapped, I suppose. The industry is not particularly robust, and they've been frightened to change direction because they know the course that they've been going down has paid the bills, and they're nervous about changing.
Like the Davis family, John Lillico has seen the clover come back and a healthier milking herd.
I'm quite sure that the way we're going is the way of the future. It certainly wasn't a sustainable system the way we farmed before.
Next week in part 2, we'll learn how other farming enterprises are embracing biological farming, from champion racehorses through to fine wine and even the humble potato. That's Landline next Sunday.